The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the producers of this broadcast. The material herein is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to Afterlife Radio. This is Kalila Smith coming to you live from New Orleans. And my co-host, Billy Roberts from the UK. Hello, Billy. How are you?
Hi, Kalila. It's really nice to speak to you again. Yeah, well, I'm fine. The weather isn't, mind you, but I'm okay.
It happens. It's that time of year for rain and so forth, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and you get the same kind of rain that we do, basically, with the Gulf Stream. So I always found that very interesting. It hits us, and then it makes its way up the Atlantic over to you.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes. So we're going to have another exciting show today. We're going to talk a little bit about the different types of hauntings that one might come across in a paranormal investigation. And then later on in the show, Billy's going to talk to us about thought forms. Something you don't think about much is thought forms. Sometimes we put them out without even realizing it. And also talk a little bit about some of the healing methods, if you are a healing type of medium. But let's kind of go over, because a lot of people who are into the paranormal stuff are also into the mediumship things as well. But a lot of people don't even understand. And I think one of the first things you have to understand is what really is a haunting and what's not. Because there's lots of different hauntings. We have the intelligent haunting, if you will, where you have the actual entity that can come through and speak. Then, of course, we have the residual haunting, and Billy's gone into a lot of depth about that in some of the previous shows, as well as poltergeist and shadow people. But what's your opinion, Billy, of the intelligent hauntings? When people are on an investigation and they say that they've had an interaction with what they believe to be an intelligent haunting, I don't feel like that's the same thing as when we are working as mediums with loved ones on the other side. What are your thoughts on that?
Unless you're mediumistically inclined, then you're going to identify the different or discriminate between all the different haunting types. But there's a geological phenomenon, triboluminescence, which basically is the friction caused by crystals or other minerals below ground. And scientists believe that this can interrupt the electromagnetic field in a location. So, I mean, everything is recorded. It's referred to as the stone tape theory, which is the belief that all emotional happenings are recorded into the fabric of a building, the bricks and mortar fabric of a building. But the atmosphere is like a videotape that's coated with an electromagnetic substance to catch or capture sound and images. And triboluminescence in certain locations, particularly damp areas, can precipitate the electromagnetic field and release these images, these sounds. So sometimes in an old building, we're looking at a sort of a video replay of things that have happened in the past. And they're not really images of a spirit, a disembodied soul. They're just like flicking through a video or a photograph album. Then you've got the other one, which is when a disembodied soul actually presents itself. And these are conscious of your presence. They can interact with you. They can talk to you. They don't always listen to you, but they like to repeat what they're saying. And sometimes it's quite spontaneous. You've also got the corner of the eye syndrome, where spirits can appear in the corner of your eye, your peripheral vision. But when you turn to look at them, they're not there. You can't see them. So there are different types of so some are quite audible. You can hear the different sounds echoing through time, but they too are not really the disembodied soul.
Got you. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a very interesting perspective because, for so many years I was doing paranormal investigations and often thought that I was communicating with something intelligent, and it certainly seemed that way. Then when my daughter passed away, I couldn't reach her, and I became terrified. And I even called a friend of mine who's also a medium, whom I had worked with on paranormal investigations, and I said, did we make all of this up over the last 20 years? Did we imagine this? And he said, no, we didn't. And I started really delving into it a bit. And one of the very interesting things that I found on the near-death experience, because I read numerous books on it, and I literally read about thousands of, different instances where there was a near-death experience. And I found it very interesting that people would describe what they saw and experienced during this phenomena. And they always described usually the tunnel, going through the tunnel, they're moving through the tunnel. They're aware of other souls that are also there with them. Oftentimes they would mention there were animals in the tunnel as well. And there was usually this little incidental sideline that would say, there were some souls that were not moving. Mm-hmm. And that really struck me because it was like my aha moment. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, there's your earthbound entities. What do you think about that?
That's an interesting point. Some neuroscientists believe, there are chemicals in the brain. For example, when somebody has a near-death experience, it's confined within the bony box, the neurological side of the person. So anything outside of that doesn't occur. So I think sometimes, they're very, very similar, the experiences going down a tunnel towards light, and some can see relatives, deceased relatives, and others have seen, anonymous faces, anonymous people. And I think there are different experiences we're all very different the way we perceive things. And I think you have to tread with great caution, though, because it's human nature to embroider things. When you listen to somebody who's had an experience in a paranormal situation, and we tend to, some people, not everybody, tends to elaborate, embroider, make it more fanciful than it actually is. So I said before to you, sometimes I can look at the color red and you can identify it, but you don't know whether it's the same shade of red that I'm seeing. The same with any color, because we perceive things in different ways.
Right.
And this also brings me back to clairaudience, the ability to hear supersensual sounds. Sometimes you think it's your imagination, but clairaudience can be extraneous thoughts, a stream of thoughts coming into your mind that they're not your thoughts. And sometimes you get, there's an environmental medium where you can go into a location and have an experience and pass it on to the people that you're with. But I'm very skeptical. I've got to see things for myself and hear things for myself, because we're all very different. And I've become very judgmental in my old age and very critical. So I think that the case is still open. I think I'll reserve judgment on a lot of things.
Right. I think we all become a little more discerning when we get older. But one of the things that I found most interesting about the near-death experiences, there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Long, who happens to live here in Louisiana. And he had done a lot of research on the near-death experiences. And one of the things that he noticed was that people who had been blind their entire lives, who would not know what the color red looked like or what the color blue looked like, people who were born blind and spent their entire lives blind, when they had a near-death experience, came back describing things that they saw to a T. So, yeah, right. Things that make you go, So that's my point, is that, there's always that one or two, and in this case, those thousands of instances where, how do you explain something like that?
Yeah, that's another interesting point, because I knew a medium, she's long since gone, but she was blind from birth. And I did a couple of shows with her, and she would actually say, can I come to the lady in the back of the auditorium, the one with the red jacket on and the pearl necklace? And, bear in mind, she'd never seen anything in her whole life, but she could discriminate between colors. She could be spot on with everything she did. And she used tarot cards, would you believe, in private consultations. She didn't see them as we see them, but she went on the vibratory experience of each card. So I know that some blind people, some visually handicapped people can be very, very psychic. And it brings me to another, I might say, well, are they really blind? Have they been blind from birth? And I used to say this to Mavis, her name was Mavis Mitchell, and she had a brilliant sense of humor. But yeah, that's an interesting concept, blindness in mediums.
Yeah, that is. It's extremely, extremely bizarre that she would see that.
Yeah.
But, one time I was down in Miami, as I had been many, many times, going to spiritual misas in the Santeria religion. And I was there one time, and it was a huge celebration. There was a lot of people there, and things really got rolling. I mean, those mediums that were in the misas in Miami were just amazing. I mean, amazing. And just gave different interpretations of things, very different from what we see in the spiritist church and spiritualist church. But this was really going, and the energy was high in the room, and they were just rattling off things. And at some point, they were all talking Spanish. And it was interesting because my Spanish is horrible. My Spanish is absolutely horrible. I can read Spanish better than I understand it. So if someone's talking, especially if they're talking fast, I have a hard time keeping up with that. I have a hard time understanding what they're saying. But at some point, the vibration was so high, even though audibly I was hearing Spanish on a different level, I still understood what they were saying, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then after the Misa had closed and they closed the circle and everything, there was a gentleman there who spoke Spanish quite well, but he was Portuguese. And when I told him that I understood it, he says, well, that's really strange that you say they were speaking Spanish. He says, because I heard everything in Portuguese.
Stay tuned for more Afterlife Radio.
Step beyond the veil that separates our world from the world of spirits with me, Kalila Smith, as we uncover the mysteries of the afterlife. This is a spiritual journey as we try to discover if life really does continue after the physical death. Are after-death communications real, or do we imagine them? Get my book, Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, and find out. Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, available on Amazon.com by Kalila Smith.
You're listening to Afterlife Radio.
So it's really amazing that once you kind of surpass the physical, that on a totally different level, it transcends language even. So it's really amazing, some of the things that we
I mean,
encounter.
all the different aspects of mediumship are really fascinating. What spoils it is the fact that a lot of people put themselves out there when they're not mediums, purporting to be a medium and giving a lot of nonsense to the people who consult them. I mean, that's totally what I'm against. I mean, I don't know what it's like in America, but here in the UK, we have thousands of paranormal groups, ghost hunting groups, and they go under different names. And, if you're not experienced, you don't know what you're looking for. You don't know how to identify something. It could be a thought form. And a thought form is basically something that's been mentally created by individuals who, either from the past or people who are still incarnated in this modern time. People are very, very good at creating images. And the ancient Egyptians were really good at that, because they used to create all these thought forms to protect the tombs of the pharaohs. Now, many yoga teachers will tell you thoughts crystallize into habit, and habit solidifies into circumstances. And most people are willing to change their circumstances, but very few of us are willing to change ourselves. And so are ever bound to circumstances simply by the way we think. And if you dwell upon something long enough, whether it be good or bad, you actually release a lot of energy and create a thought form. And this thought form can take the image of you or the creator, it's his or herself. And the ancient Egyptians used to do that to protect the tombs. And a lot of what we see in so-called haunted locations are no more than thought forms, images that were created either consciously or unconsciously by the people who live or have lived there in the past. And then you go on a grander scale, cities, towns, nations, they're permeated by the thoughts of the people who live there. And a nation that's stricken by famine and war and disharmony, they'll never change because of the thought clouds, these clouds that hover over their nation, influencing the minds of people who live there. And you can feel it sometimes when you go into a certain area, either in America or in the UK. You can actually get a sense of the foreboding or the disharmony that exists in that place. Don't you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I also believe that I often get calls from people who, it's the old, I have a demon in my basement, or I have a demon in my attic. And they think they have a demon. And of course, the question comes up, well, why do you think that? Tell me what happened that made you think this. And oftentimes the story will begin with, well, I was working with a Ouija board, or, well, I was trying to dabble in some black magic, and I was trying to conjure a spirit. And I truly believe that in these kind of situations, oftentimes when there is something that they think is an intelligent entity there, it is nothing more than something that they materialized with their thoughts.
Exactly.
That they actually manufactured something to, and the unconscious mind says, if you believe it long enough, the unconscious mind says, okay, we'll just make it happen. Don't you think?
Yeah, exactly. It's basically what I've been saying. And I mean, Dion Fortune, it was quite well known. She wrote a book called Psychic Self-Defense.
Yes, fabulous book.
Yeah, fun. Well, she said the only way you can deal with thought forms, demonic thought forms, who can attack you when you're asleep, particularly when you're in the hypnagogic state. That's when you're just falling asleep. You're not quite asleep, but you're half asleep and half awake. Then thought forms, the vagabonds of the astral world, can attack you. And she was constantly attacked by a wolf-like creature. And she realized that the only way she could destroy it completely was to use a sword that she created mentally before she went to sleep. And that's how she did it. In a sleep state, she was able to cut its head off while she was asleep. And
Wow, I don't remember that. I read that book so many years ago.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It is. I think it was written, in the 1940s or
I think
before
so.
that.
But I don't know whether you know Sylvan Muldoon. He was an Irishman. It had nothing to do with spiritualism or mediums, but he had tuberculosis, I think it was, and he was on the point of dying. And we're going back into the 1920s, and I think again that might have been in New York. And he had an out-of-body experience that was exhilarating. He'd never had anything like it in his life. And cut a long story short, he recovered from the tuberculosis and made a full recovery. But he wanted to replicate the experience that he'd had when he was ill. He wrote a book called, I think it was called Astral Travel, if I remember rightly. I think the name changed at one point by the publisher. And he gives you some exercises that you can use to precipitate the astral experience. But he always said, once you can only go so far, because as it says in the Bible, we're attached to a sort of a silver thread. And if that silver thread comes in contact with a vagabond in the astral world, they can sever it, cut it, and you are dead. You just die. Nothing can bring you back. So he always said you can only go so far, and you have to rely on prayer and those people in the spirit world who help you. And it's an interesting book. It's a bit archaic, but some of the exercises are quite old, and they're quite effective as well.
What was that book called? I'm going to write this down. I'm going to check this
I
out.
think it's called, I know I'm going to be wrong. His name is Sylvan Muldoon, and it's Astral Travel, or Projection of the Astral Body. And it's still available on Amazon, I think.
See, that's something that I've never cared to do. There's just something about that disturbs me. I think it's the whole part of your cord being cut by a vagabond. That's just not very appealing to me. But having grown up Catholic, we were always told that if you did something like that, that those vagabond spirits can actually enter your body and take over.
I'm not really sure. I've never believed that a disembodied soul can occupy the body that's already occupied. I mean, trance is a different thing, or what Edgar Cayce used to do as a sleeping prophet.
Right.
You go into the somnambulistic state where his mind would be influenced by disembodied souls. And I think that's basically what trance mediumship is.
Right. Yeah, but that's different. I mean, I'm talking about like what you call walk-ins. I don't know if you use that terminology in the UK, but there's something that I've studied about walk-ins, where a spirit literally walks into another body.
Yeah, I know.
And I know there's attachments. I know that they can attach.
Yeah. I'm not really, it's my skeptical side coming out again. I mean, I have a lot of people who write to me, email me, or come to my office who claim to have had a walk-in. And I'm really skeptical. There are psychological conditions that can bring about these states. In fact, there's an organization, and I don't know what it's called, that believes that schizophrenics are low-grade mediums. Now, I can believe that to a degree. I mean, some people are very poorly, but the voices they hear are low-grade disembodied souls, which makes sense in some way, because I've known some people who are schizophrenic and have been treated for it and have refined and developed their mediumship because of the illness. It's not advisable. Don't try that at home.
Yeah, no. No, do not try these things at home. No, it's not good. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. As there's a lot of things out there that you don't want to fool with. But I do think that sometimes we create our own demons out of thought forms. So it's really important to not only watch what you say, but watch what you think, watch what you focus on, watch what you dwell upon, because those are the things. I think I've mentioned this before, that the thought form goes out into the astral plane and it's there in your ether. And at some point in time, it will manifest on the physical plane. That's one of the laws of the universe. So whatever's out there, as above, so below.
Exactly.
It's going to manifest at some point in time on the physical plane, and it's not going to go somewhere else. It's going to come back to you.
Exactly.
So you always want to make sure that you not only careful what you say, careful what you wish for, but careful what you think, and careful what you're putting out to the universe, and be very mindful on what you're putting out there, because these things will manifest at some point in time, and you don't want to draw it. And then everyone says, well, how did that happen? Where did that come from?
Yeah. Well,
and you have to remember, it always comes from you.
Well, the Buddhist precept that I mentioned last time, curses and blessings come home to roost. And I know for a fact that precept works in our lives. So whatever, as you've just said, you send out, if you have a resentment for somebody who doesn't deserve it, your resentment will rebound from that person's aura, and it will return to you, and it will gather force from the impact. And that's all to do with energy and thought transference. There's one of my greatest teachers was a guy called Yogi Ramacharaka. And he wrote a book called The 14 Lessons in Yogi Philosophy and Oriental Occultism, 1903, I think it was. And one of the chapters in his book is called Thought Dynamics. And he really goes through, he explains perfectly well how the nature of thinking manifests in your life, and how it affects other people with whom you associate. So, you can't, like you've just said, where did that come from? Of course, it came from you. And Buddha said, didn't he? You don't get what you want. You get what you are. And again, that was down to the law of cause and effect, which we've covered before. So it's all fascinating. I mean, sometimes things occur in your life that you think, well, I don't remember thinking this. And you have go through a stroke of bad luck, or you have periods in your life where things are not going right. And again, within the confines of karma, they do believe that you do bring it all on yourself. Sounds cruel, but sometimes it's quite a valid explanation.
Right. Although some things, say for instance a pandemic, I don't think any of us brought that on ourselves. I don't think we created that. There are some things that are beyond our control. There are some things out here that we cannot explain, and there are some things that we have absolutely no control over, and sometimes things just happen randomly, like a pandemic. Or a hurricane. None of these things are things that we're dwelling on or hoping to get. They're just things that are really beyond our control. But a large percentage of what goes on in our lives is within our control, and you can control it and make it better by just thinking better thoughts and putting better thoughts out to the universe. So we're going to take a little break now, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the healing side of mediumship. We'll be right back.
Submitted for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine, if you will, a tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter of actual documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN. And it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about. The Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween spookhouse. This is real.
Okay, we are back, and we're going to talk about another aspect of mediumship, which is the healing side of mediumship. So many people come into the world of mediumship. They want to be a medium, or they feel that they are a medium, and they all want to be a certain type of medium. I'm going to be the best person out there on the platform, and I'm going to be the most famous television medium, or I'm going to be a physical medium, and I'm going to have things flying around the room. And people have to understand, just like the medium doesn't select who comes through for the message, we don't really pick what our special abilities are, if you will. We don't decide for ourselves what kind of medium we are. I think it's already predetermined. And as you develop and go down different avenues and try different things, you will start resonating more to what is your path. And spirit kind of leads you in that direction. For instance, I am in a circle with a young woman who does trance mediumship, and she does direct voice, where the spirits talk through her. It doesn't matter how much I try, how many workshops I attend, I will not do what she does, because it's not who I am. So that being said, we have mental mediumship, and we have physical mediumship, and there's also a healing aspect of mediumship. And Billy's going to give us a little lesson here on the healing part of mediums.
Well, I was always taught that healing is the highest form of mediumship. But in saying that, being a medium doesn't necessarily make you a healer. I mean, healing has to be in you. Some part of your development, as you've just said, something takes over. But a lot of what goes out today as healing is purely psychic healing. It's nothing to do with the spirit. I mean, but we spoke on another program about pranic healing. You can have Reiki, which is a Japanese form of healing. And I think that you have to be in tune with a person to administer healing. I mean, when I first started, all that I wanted to do was be a healer. And I joined the National Federation of Spiritual Healers. I was with them for quite a long time until I thought, well, a certificate doesn't make me a healer. And then I found that in my center in Liverpool, people were coming to me for healing. They were sent to me by the National Federation. And I look at some people and I knew that it wasn't going to work for them, because I know you have to be in rapport, in tune with the individual. And other people, you find perfect harmony and you can apply the healing to them. But healing, even at its best, I think takes away a certain kind of pain. And if the person is suffering with cancer, it can take away fear. I've not really known it to produce a full cure. One of the greatest UK healers was a man called Harry Edwards, who was world renowned, and he was quite well known. People used to travel from all over the world to see him. He worked well with painful conditions such as arthritic issues, and all to do with the spine. And he was quite an unusual man, because he smoked. And apparently he drank whiskey. He was quite a normal man in every sense of the word. But his healing was very, very unusual. And I've observed not just him, but other healers throughout the period I've been working as a medium. I hosted a show at the Liverpool Philharmonic Hall in some years ago, in late 80s. And the greater world, who are the Christian aspect of spiritualism, they put on a show. It's basically about healing, and two healers they had. But I noticed they very selective over who they invited onto the stage, they sort of monitored the people in the audience and seemed to pick the people they knew would be more susceptible to their healing. Now, I think a lot of that's to do with faith. Without being too religious, even in the Bible, Jesus, all the examples of healing he did, there were two blind beggars that he couldn't heal. And he just turned, I was going to say turned a blind eye to them, but he...
No pun intended.
Yeah, but he made them follow him a few miles to his home in Nazareth. And then he turned round and he said to them, your faith has healed you. And lo and behold, their sight was restored. But he didn't even touch them. It was just their faith in him and the way they followed him. And a lot of this healing process works on the faith a person has in the healer. I do something called pranic healing, which is to do with pranayama, breathing in a certain way and directing the energy that I breathe in to the person who's with me. Or it can be directed to somebody who lives in Australia, the other side of the world. So distant healing also works. You don't have to lay on hands. You can do it in different ways. I don't know what it's like in America for healers. It's probably pretty much the same, is it?
It is. And I studied to be a healer many, many years ago. I got certified with Reiki and later started studying Qigong healing.
Oh, yeah.
Which was more of a healing aspect of a particular martial arts. And then studied some of the pranic healing. And basically it's all the same. But once I started really delving deeper into my mediumship and started taking some of the classes with some of the people who do healing mediumship, I found that it's totally different with that. Because with a lot of the healers, it's not just you channeling that energy to them or channeling your energy to them. Some of the healers actually have spirits that step in, the spirits of doctors, the spirits, well, I've heard anyway, I don't do it, but I've heard that there are mediums where medical teams on the spirit world will come in and step in and work through them. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I have. Since I was 3, I've suffered with something called bronchiectasis, which is incurable, a respiratory problem. And in the early 90s, I won't mention his name, there was a trance healer, and he had clinics down in the south of England. And I made an appointment to go and see him. And he was what's called a psychic surgeon. And he was allegedly entranced by a German surgeon from the First World War. Now, coincidentally, I was seeing my consultant the next afternoon. So I went along to see this man. I think he charged £20 at the time. And I looked, there were coach loads of people, most of them elderly. There were foreign people from Germany, from Poland, and they'd all come to see this man in his beautiful house. And he had a clinic there, and I was taken into a room that looked, to all intents and purposes, like hospital surgery. I was told to take my shirt off, and there were instruments at the side of the bed that looked like proper surgical instruments. Anyway, I was lying face down, and he picked up a surgical knife to make an incision. He came in, uttered something in with a foreign accent. I'd seen this guy when he wasn't in trance, and he looked completely different. But the person who was with me gasped because he actually made an incision in my back, and blood came out. And he put something into my back that I couldn't see, obviously. And he removed what looked like to me to be a massive cotton wool soaked in blood. And then he started to put some sutures in my back. Bear in mind, I didn't feel a great deal of discomfort. And when it was over, I said to him, can I take what you've removed? He told me that I had some kind of a mass, some kind of a cancerous growth that he'd fully removed. I knew I didn't have cancer. I had bronchiectasis. I said to him, can I take this with me out of a matter of interest because I'm a writer? And he said, I need to process it first. And he took it into another room. But what reappeared when he came back were like little tablets of saccharin or something. Didn't bear any resemblance to what he removed from my back. I went the next day to my doctor in the hospital, who was Professor Davis. He looked at my back and he knew what I do for a living. And he photographed it. And I told him what had happened. He said, well, if he'd have put any instrument in your back at that point, you'd have been dead within seconds. It was the main aorta or something.
Oh, wow.
He said, but he said, there are suture marks and they're professionally done. And that was the only thing that this man had done to prove that he was in trance. I don't know how he did the rest of it, but it did actually cut my back. I still had a scar up there for a long time, and I still got a lot of discomfort, like itchiness, and as though somebody's messing around with my back. But ironically, I was on a TV program all about psychic surgeons, and he was on it as a guest. And when he saw me, he was uncomfortable. He wouldn't go on camera at the same time as me because he knew what I was going to bring up, because I'd approached him about it. And he was there very briefly. He did his thing on the camera, was interviewed, and he took off. And then I could say, well, I had to be very careful what I said, but I'd already written about him. Now, this guy disappeared because, I don't know how true it is, somebody had sued him because of what he did using an instrument. And he disappeared for many, many years. And then about 3 years ago, he reappeared again. And lo and behold, he was no longer the suave-looking man with short hair. He was in flowing gowns with long hair and a beard just like Jesus. And I made a report to one of the magazines that I was writing for. And they said, well, yeah, they stopped it because they were going to do an article on him. And it never heard from him again. So you have to be very careful where healers are concerned, I think, because a lot of people claim to be healers and they're not, particularly if they're charging exorbitant fees for their work. A healer really shouldn't charge, unless, of course, that's all you do and you're making a living from it and you can produce good results.
Right, right.
Sorry for that long-winded story.
No, that's very interesting, because people don't realize how far something like this can go. And I won't name names, but there was very recently a guy who had been around for decades, a Brazilian person who was a healer, a faith healer of some sort. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, if you go dig far enough, you'll find it. But there's YouTube videos, or there were anyway, of him doing procedures on people. And some of this stuff was just, it looked like he was putting a screwdriver up somebody's nose. He would sit there and pound on it with a mallet, and he would put like these, look like ice picks going into somebody's eye, and just some really insane, to me, what looked like insane procedures. And people would just stand there and allow it, or it appeared that way anyway on the video. And it was bizarre. And I actually know people who have been to him because, he'd come to the United States and they would say, oh, we're going to go see this person. And I would always like, no, I don't think so. I don't think I care to go. I'm good. I'm not going to do that. But I will say that I had some work done on me with a legitimate healing medium who had visited here. She was actually a British woman. Yeah. And I will say her name because she was really just amazing. Her name was Georgina Reagan. Right. And she lived in Mexico, but she was British. And she would visit the various places, here, Texas, and here. We brought her into here. and I had some work done on her. She had had studies done on her, scientific studies, and supposedly the jewels in her hand were the equivalent of what they used when they have to resuscitate someone, when they jumpstart your heart. I don't know the right word for it because I'm not a medical person. But nonetheless, supposedly that's what was the ampage coming out of her hands. And so I got a session with her, and I have chronic back problems. And it was very interesting because I had been a body worker before. I had studied a lot of Asian body work. I was a certified acupressurist. And I knew when she was working on acupressure points where she was, what they were called, and what she was doing. So it got very interesting, though, because I felt her. She had a fingertip like up on one of my ribs. I was face down. She had a fingertip on one of my ribs, and then a fingertip on my IT band, like closer down by my knee. And that would, be a particular meridian. I think that was a gallbladder meridian, but nonetheless, as she's doing this, and I understood that she was sending energy to that to loosen that up, I felt two hands touch me in between her two hands that never left those spots.
Huh.
So I literally felt something else step in and put their hands on me. And I even opened one eye and looked. I mean, there was no one else in the room. There was just her, and all I could see was her two hands on me. So that was pretty convincing.
Yeah.
And there was another individual who did some sort of healing, a different type of healing. I don't know what it's called, but he used to make people fall on the floor. And he said, let me work on your back. And I was like, if you make me fall on the floor, I'm going to punch you when I get up. I don't want to fall on the floor. I'm too old for that. Don't do that to me. And he said, no, I promise you won't fall on the floor. And I was like, okay. So I had my back to him and I had my eyes closed, and I could feel him working on my back. I felt someone like they were manipulating, certain areas on my back. I felt someone touching me. And at some point in time, I opened an eye just to kind of like check out my surroundings. And the guy was across the room with his arms folded. It was the weirdest thing. Because he wasn't anywhere near me. He was across the room looking at me, and he's standing there leaning against the wall, his arms folded, but yet there was no one behind me, but I could feel hands on me working on me. So I know that these things exist. I know that it happens, but your average person who's doing, healing, even in a mediumistic way, they are allowing spirits to come in, but they aren't necessarily cutting you with knives. We do want to give that disclaimer. Usually, we're talking about extreme cases.
Yeah.
So you do have to be careful. You want to be careful of people who are charging too much money, and you also want to be careful if anybody calls himself a psychic surgeon and has implements, because I wouldn't open myself up to that.
I'd like to say, though, at this point, also, I know I'm making a sweeping statement and seem to be condemning all healers, but I don't mean to, because there are some good ones. There was a guy called George Chapman who was a fireman in Bootle in Liverpool, and he became a very well-known healer. And I've had healing up from him many years ago, and I was quite poorly, and he was extremely good. And he was controlled by a deceased eye surgeon from the 1920s. And when he passed away, strangely enough, his son Michael, who I know quite well, was taken over by the dead eye surgeon's son. And Michael still he has a healing clinic in Pantglas in Wales, and he's quite well known as well. He's featured in the psychic news quite a lot. He's a brilliant healer. So there are good healers around, and the experience you've just mentioned, I've heard of that before. These are eye-openers, and they do exist. Good healers do tend to hide their light under a bushel, so to speak.
Right, yes. And what people do have to remember is oftentimes the other person is not healing you. The person that's doing, it's just like when the mental medium delivers a message from your loved one. The person who's delivering the message, the person who's the medium, the person who's the vessel, That's all they are, is a vessel.
Yeah.
That's why it's called medium.
Yeah.
But they are merely just a tube which spirit comes through and works through, whether it's giving a message, whether it's transfiguration, whether it's direct voice,
Yeah.
or whether it's healing. The spirit is coming through, working through them. It is not that person doing the healing. And what they do is they facilitate the conditions in which the person can help heal themselves.
Exactly. And also, for anybody who's interested in healing, if they have something that's in a very personal spot in the body, a healer doesn't have to actually administer the healing to the affected part. I've known healers just to apply the healing to the head, because healing is holistic. It tends to heal the whole person. And we know, don't we, that if there's a disease in the body, it's due to some kind of disharmony in the body as a whole. And healers, majority of good healers, have the beautiful way of normalizing the body, creating harmony in the body. And that's the most important thing to understand, I think.
Well, yeah, that's what it's all about. It's all about balance in the body. And a lot of things, and I want to give this disclaimer because I was a body worker and I spent so many years in the healing industry, is that don't ever go to a healer and not go to the doctor if you have something seriously wrong with you.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, with holistic healing, herbal healing, whatever you want to call it, energy healing, all of these things, again, as above, so below. These dysfunctions happened on that astral plane long before they became the physical manifestation of things. And it takes, you can have an energetic blockage that will eventually maybe cause pain or disease in your body. But by the time it reaches organ level, you need to see a Western doctor. You need to see a doctor. So, I've heard hideous stories of people who have advanced cancer and they don't get treatment because they're going to go to the holistic healer. And it's like, by the time holistic healing, herbal healing, all of these things, they're based on preventative medicine.
Exactly.
You keep the body healthy so that it doesn't go into disease.
Yeah.
And it's all about keeping the body in balance and keeping the body healthy before you get sick. Once you get a serious disease, you need to seek Western medicine. And sometimes you have to have surgery, because once it gets to be that level, you cannot just start, taking a few herbs and doing a little, energy stuff and hope to cure yourself, because people have died that way. So I do want to put that disclaimer out there that if you're truly sick, then you do need to go to the doctor. None of this should ever replace medical advice or medical treatment.
Which is why it's called complementary medicine, because it complements allopathic medicine. I think I've heard of the people who believe so much in holistic healers, they just dismiss traditional medicine completely, which is silly.
Right. Well, it is. And, it's just like people who take, you can take echinacea and golden seal for your immune system. But if you take it after you have the flu, it's not going to do any good. You have to take it. Usually you have to start doing these things months and consistently to build your immune system, to build up your body and build up these and get rid of these blockages. But once it's on organ level, they can cause some ease for you as far as pain, definitely, and maybe some of the stress, but it should never replace an actual doctor.
Exactly.
So I think it's important that people understand that, because I don't like to mislead people and let them think they're going to go and be healed by a healer. A healer doesn't heal you. A healer just creates the circumstances in which hopefully the body will heal itself.
Yeah. And also healing can be seen in the aura some considerable time before it actually affects the physical body. So anybody who has the ability to see the aura, they can identify certain illnesses.
Right. And there are some psychics who are medical intuitives who will pick up on things.
It's not
And
legal in this country, though, that kind of
oh,
thing.
really? Medical intuitives, really?
Yeah.
Really? Well, when I
Because,
do readings for people, I mean, I don't primarily do a medical reading on someone, but sometimes if someone has something going on, it will come up in a psychic reading.
yeah,
And I'll say, you might want to go have something checked out, or if you've, you might want to go get a physical exam. I think you do one. And just advise people that you may want to go have this checked out. But yeah, again, it doesn't replace a true diagnostic from a physician.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I meant. Diagnosing illnesses is not legal. People have found themselves in serious trouble
Oh,
diagnosing.
right.
Well,
Well, right. Yeah, here as well. I don't know about the rest of the United States, but in Louisiana, we have those antiquated French laws, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So we're not under, the rest of the United States is under English common law, and we're under Napoleonic code. But here in Louisiana, you have to be a physician in order to do any type of diagnosis. So, people can mention, I'm picking up something about, your health, and you might want to go and have a checkup with your doctor.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
you just want to be careful what people are promoting about themselves, and always get second opinions. Always get second opinions. And I tell people that even when they come to me for like psychic readings, I tell them, go get a second opinion,
Exactly.
because,
Yeah.
it never hurts to have someone else tell you the same thing, or someone tell you something that maybe somebody else didn't pick up, especially when it comes to health things.
Stay tuned for more Afterlife Radio.
Follow me, Kalila Smith, into the mysterious world of spirits. Searching for Spirits, the ultimate guide for ghost hunters, is a concise how-to manual for anyone who enjoys a good ghost hunt. Learn the history of spiritualism, learn what a ghost is and what is not, learn the truth about poltergeist. We'll also delve into the realm of spiritual beings that never were human, the world of demons, real vampires, and we'll look at some real case studies. This is a must-have for everyone interested in ghost hunting, from the novice to the expert. Completely updated in its second edition, this is one of the first guides for ghost hunting based on actual first-hand experiences. Available on Amazon.com. Searching for Spirits, the ultimate guide for ghost hunters, by Kalila Smith.
You're listening to Afterlife Radio.
So, well, Billy, what do you think, lastly, what advice would you give to budding mediums out there, people who are working on their development, new people who are coming into mediumship and they are working on their development? What would you advise if they are trying to figure out what kind of medium they are going to be?
I think, to be honest, it's always wise and safer to work with another medium, somebody who's professional, somebody who's experienced, and try and get a group of people, not a large group, because when a lot of people get involved in development, you get the green-eyed goddess and jealousy and the bickering. But it's always better to work with a small group and be supervised by a professional, somebody who's experienced with development, the process of development. And also read as much as you possibly can. I mean, I've had people say, I don't read. Spirit, give me all the information. Well, that's a crass statement. And I think you've got to read as many different books on different subjects as you possibly can. And meditation is the key to self-mastery. I've heard very well-known mediums say, oh, no, meditation's got nothing to do with development, and I never meditate. You have to meditate to be focused, to train the mind to be focused, and to make it quiet. So to allow the spirit people, these disembodied souls who do help us, to come close, and they can only come close if we are quiet. So I've always believed that when you sit with a group under the supervision of an experienced medium, then also sit by yourself to allow the people who are helping you to try different things on you, because they experiment with you. And it also helps you to put things in perspective. If you have a group and then sit by yourself, it's a long haul. And even when you've developed these abilities, development still goes on and on and on. I mean, I'm learning things all the time. And things do occur with my development to open a new vista, a new portal, if you like, to my development. So you're learning all the time. And also the other thing I did was see as many different mediums as possible, to go and see how they work, even have private consultations with them to see how it's all done. But don't try and mimic other mediums. You might have a favorite medium, but don't try and copy the way they work, because they might have an inimitable style that might not apply or work for you. It's basically what I would do. But everybody's different in their approach to development.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Billy. This has been a fabulous show. Thank all of you for coming and listening in. We appreciate you guys. We love you. And we hope that you will join our Facebook private group. We have a discussion group on Facebook called Afterlife Radio Podcast Group. And if you go to it, you can request to be added in, and we're happy to add you in. You can join in discussions. You can ask questions, even send us questions that you might like addressed on a show. And also, you can even make suggestions. If there's a particular subject that you'd like us to talk about, we're open to suggestions as well. So please, again, it's Afterlife Radio Podcast Group, and we hope to hear from you. Thank you all for coming in, and have a wonderful night.
Yeah, thank you, Kalila. Thank you.